Over the last few years, piles of e-bikes strewn across the pavement have become an unlikely fixture outside London stations. But stations aren't the only places you'll find them. They turn up along narrow pavements, in alleys, beside shop fronts, and at road junctions, almost anywhere a journey happens to end. Some are neatly parked, others lean against one another, or lie across the pavement. It's easy to blame the rider, and most of the time we probably should. Someone finished their journey, left the bike wherever was most convenient for them, and walked away. But thousands of bikes have now been introduced into London, while the space and infrastructure to accommodate them remain limited and inconsistent. Every journey needs to end somewhere, and when there's no obvious place for the bike to go, the pavement is often where it ends up. This feels like a very modern problem, created by apps, rental companies, and a new form of transport spreading rapidly across the streets. But while the e-bike may be one of the latest ways to irritate many Londoners, blocked pavements are really nothing new. And there was a time when London didn't even have pavements at all. In 1716, John Gay published a guide to walking through London. It was written as a comic poem, but the joke depended on something very real. Walking through the city required skill. A walker had to watch the stones beneath their feet, listen for wheels behind them, and read the movement of the crowd. An open cellar could send them tumbling below the street, and a line of posts could make the difference between a comparatively safe walk and direct competition with carts, coaches, and horses. London did have some pedestrian space. Certain streets had flatter strips beside the road, and Gay praised places such as Pall Mall and Cheapside for offering better protection. But that provision was inconsistent. In a narrow street, the protected route might simply disappear. The safest place was usually beside the wall. There, the walker was further from the wheels, the mud, and the gutter running through or beside the road. But even this narrow strip had to be negotiated. People competed for the position nearest the wall, and those with less power could be pushed back towards the mud and traffic. The pavement had not yet become one continuous piece of public infrastructure, and getting down the street safely became a matter of etiquette, social hierarchy, and self-defense. The problem was not simply that London needed better surfaces. It needed a route that did not disappear from one street or one house to the next. At the beginning of the 18th century, maintaining a street was very much a local responsibility. Individual occupiers might be expected to look after the street outside their own properties. One frontage could be repaired reasonably well, the next could be lower, rougher, or neglected altogether. Materials changed, levels changed, and the pedestrian experienced the streets of London house by house. A route that appeared continuous on a map could become a succession of pits, loose stones, ridges, and sudden changes in height. And London was placing more pressure on those streets. More coaches entered the city. New, wealthier districts in the west sent traffic towards the centre. Commerce expanded. Parliament, the courts, and the markets drew more people and goods through routes that were already congested. By the middle of the century, poorly maintained streets were no longer just unpleasant. They were becoming an obstacle to the operation of London itself. The paving reforms of the 1760s began transferring responsibility from individual occupiers to commissioners who could plan and improve whole streets. The change involved much more than laying better stones. Pedestrian routes were raised, drainage was moved from the middle of the road towards the gutters at the side, and streetlights were placed more evenly along the street. The surface, drainage, lighting and navigation of the street were increasingly treated as parts of a single system. In July 1765, the improved route from Charing Cross to Temple Bar was completed. The Strand now offered a more regular surface, better lighting, and a clearer division between pedestrians and the vehicles passing beside them. Walking became safer, and the street became easier to navigate. But that success gave the pavement a new value. The safer and cleaner the route became, the more useful it became to anyone who wanted to access the people moving along it. The pavement wasn't just where people walked, it was also where the buildings opened onto the street. Customers and goods entered and left across it. Sellers opened into it. Shopkeepers depended on the people moving along the pavement, and that movement created the opportunity. A sign outside the shop mattered because people could see it. An open frontage or window display could catch the attention of someone passing by. But each business was trying to do the same thing. Signs, displays, deliveries, and goods all competed with the flow of pedestrians for the same limited space. What helped one shop attract customers could make the route harder for everyone else to use. The pavement had been created to separate people from the traffic, but it quickly became valuable for far more than walking. And nowhere was that conflict more obvious than in London's street markets. There, trade didn't simply spill onto the pavement, it could occupy it almost entirely. During the 19th century, London's street markets expanded. As London spread, many new neighbourhoods grew up far from its established markets. Costermongers bridged the gap, buying produce from places such as Billingsgate, Covent Garden and Spitalfields and carrying it out to the streets where people lived. Some traded from carts and barrows, others laid boards across trestles and turned a patch of street into a temporary shop. They set up where customers already passed. That could mean the curb, the roadway or the pavement. In 1867, Parliament passed the Metropolitan Streets Act. Its restrictions on goods remaining on roads and pavements appeared to offer a simple solution to congestion. But the legislation threatened to remove an entire economic system that lawmakers had barely accounted for. Critics warned that tens of thousands of livelihoods were at risk, working-class families could lose access to cheap food, and nearby shops could lose the crowds that markets brought to their doors. The law was quickly amended. Costermongers and hawkers could remain, provided they followed police regulations. Over time, those regulations began to define exactly how much of the street a stall could occupy. 9 feet long, 3 feet wide, with 4 feet between each one. But regulating markets in the street was only one possible answer. London also tried moving them somewhere else. At Bethnal Green, an elaborate complex was built to house Columbia Market. It had a permanent architecture, formal market rights and detailed rules, and reportedly cost £250,000. But it closed after only 6 months. Later attempts to revive it also failed. Columbia Market finally closed for good in 1885, and the building was demolished around 1960. But while the purpose-built market disappeared, street trading in the surrounding area survived. Columbia Road is still occupied by an outdoor market today, now selling flowers and plants rather than food. Street markets could become difficult to pass, leave refuse behind, and force pedestrians and vehicles around them. But clearing the obstruction could also remove the system that supplied the neighbourhood. London's answer was compromise. Limit the size of each pitch, regulate trading hours, but allow the trade to remain. But the space available for that compromise was about to shrink. As motor traffic grew, the space in the road became more tightly allocated. Vehicles moved along the carriageway. Buses stopped in marked places. The curb was used for parking and loading. The pavement remained the most flexible part of the street. And when a new transport system arrived, without enough dedicated space of its own, that was where it ended up. A Santander bike belongs to a fixed system. It begins at one docking station and has to finish at another. That creates limitations. The rider needs a station near the start of the journey and an empty dock near the destination. But the physical arrangement is clear. Dockless rental bikes remove that requirement. A rider can find one close to where their journey begins and leave it close to where their journey ends. That's the central attraction. During the underground disruption of September 2025, its value became obvious. Forest reported 20,000 app downloads in a single day, and 4 times as many rides as the previous Tuesday morning. Lyme reported almost 50% more trips. At some stations, bikes were taken almost as quickly as they became available. For people facing closed stations, crowded buses, and expensive alternatives, the rental bike kept their journeys moving. It was the part of London's transport system that was still working. But every one of those journeys still needed somewhere to end. The same flexibility that brought bikes to major stations also concentrated them outside offices, shops, and transport interchanges. The system had expanded mobility without providing enough spaces for the bikes to stop. When the bays filled, or where no bays existed, the pavement became the default place to leave them. The rider still made the final parking decision, but a transport system operating across London can't depend entirely on every rider finding a considerate solution where no obvious space has been provided. Street markets were eventually given defined pictures because London learned that informal activity needed a physical boundary. Dockless rental began without enough of the equivalent, clearly marked spaces where journeys could end. And the cost of that missing space wasn't shared equally. For many people, a bike across the pavement is an irritation they can step around. For blind and partially sighted people, it can make a familiar route difficult to follow and force them towards the road. In a 2025 RNIB survey, 92% of respondents said street obstacles had forced them into the carriageway. The pavement couldn't simply keep absorbing whatever the rest of the street had failed to accommodate. The bikes needed somewhere else to go. In Lambeth, the answer is appearing in the road itself. The borough is adding 136 more places where rental bikes can be left, bringing its network to more than 500 bays. Many occupy curbside space that might otherwise be used for parking. Lambeth has chosen to treat some of that space as negotiable. Instead of squeezing the bikes around pedestrians, it's giving them an allocated place in the road. That doesn't remove every badly parked bike. The rider still decides where an individual journey ends, but the operator controls the fleet, the parking rules in its app, and the teams responsible for obstructing bikes. Enforcement can require the operator to clear a blocked pavement. The bay gives the bike somewhere else to go. That means taking space previously used for parking and giving it a new purpose. The pavement is cleared not by removing the bikes, but by making room for them somewhere more appropriate. It's the same compromise London eventually reached with the street markets: define the space, set the rules, and allow the activity to remain. But rental bikes won't be the last new thing London's streets have to accommodate. London has faced this kind of problem before. The pavement was created only after fragmented streets had become an obstacle to the city itself. Street markets expanded long before anyone had decided how much space they should occupy. And e-bikes arrived long before anyone had thought through what to do with them. The bike bay won't be the final answer to pavement congestion. It's just the latest attempt to catch up. Because London's streets are constantly changing, and London itself is almost always one step behind.